Dr Eileen Carter is the Provincial Manager in the Eastern Cape for the SA Human Rights Commission. Dr Carter, good afternoon to you. You looked at several aspects of this. Firstly, the SA Police Service and the Eastern Cape Liquor Board. How did they fail in this case?
Afternoon, Stephen. Afternoon to the viewers. We looked at a systemic concern. We did not necessarily go into the criminality or the civil liability, but we looked at a range of concerns and issues that these relevant stakeholders needed to account for. So in terms of the Eastern Cape Liquor Board, you would have noted from our finding that we said that they admitted to the fact that they are not properly capacitated. Now, if you look at the numbers in our report, we state those that for every one inspector had to look after 470 liquor outlets. Now, a quick calculation would determine, as per the Liquor Board's own APP of 2022-23 as well, that 93 of these outlets would have to be inspected on a daily basis if the inspectors were to go and get through all of them by the end of the year. And that is simply irrational. One cannot imagine that these taverns or these outlets would then be appropriately overseen. And the compliance issues would then obviously be proliferated because we are simply not adhering to enforcing and monitoring compliance.
I think everybody knows that this happens, that we have liquor laws on the books. You're not allowed to drink alcohol until you turn 18. You're not allowed to sell alcohol until you turn 18. In some places, you have liquor laws that say taverns must close at midnight. And everyone kind of knows that that's not what happens, that the police don't enforce these laws.
So I think this is where one of the issues is an awareness campaign that is required, not only amongst members of the communities, but perhaps amongst the relevant stakeholders as well. What we found is that there's a clear lack of training in terms of the relevant prescripts, specifically from SAHRC. Who gets to do what compliance and who gets to enforce compliance. So, for instance, what we found was the owners of this specific tavern particularly indicating to SAHRC that they are not mandated to oversee the compliance of bylaws, and then referring SAHRC, in fact, to the Buffalo City Metro Municipality for enforcement. So there are a range of concerns here, and what we are asking is that we need to start filling the gaps and we need to start bringing these stakeholders closer together. And in fact, Stephen, there are mechanisms available to do that already.
The parents have been through the worst possible time with all of this, losing their children. And it seemed at one point that the health department was refusing to actually tell the parents why their children died. And even talking to you now as someone who's followed the case from afar, but followed it closely, I can't tell you why these children died. How would you describe the way the parents have been treated, and particularly by the Eastern Cape Health Department in all of this?
So, Stephen, you would know that the inquest is pending and the Commission respects that process to unfold as well. But we've already now made a finding against the Department of Health that they have infringed on the dignity of these parents. These parents, as you indicated, have gone through a very tough process, and they are faced with a lack of information and a lack of clarity in terms of what has caused the death of their children. So we have found that the department, in not being clear about these processes, a lack of timeliness and a lack of clarity, have infringed on the dignity, at least, of these parents.
It seems amazing, and I still don't understand how this can happen, is that normally, if someone dies, there is a medical examination. Now, it cannot be, it seems inhuman to me to insist that the parents must wait for the inquest to see all of this medical evidence when this medical evidence must exist. I just can't understand what possible justification there could be for that. And I worry maybe that the health department, and I'm going to use this phrase, is frankly getting away with it because the parents come from a poor community, and I don't know if the health department would dare treat a rich person like this.
I would want to echo a portion of your statement in the sense, Stephen, that even with the compliance of bylaws, one would see that the bylaws were flouted in these communities. And we are asking ourselves whether the same would be echoed in a community within an urban area. And then we would ask whether we are giving the protection that is required to vulnerable communities as well, equally as we would in an urban area. But Stephen, we invited the parents this morning to the launch of the report. In fact, we provided them with a report before we made this report public, and we sat with them this morning, taking them through our findings and recommendations. And the parents were very clear that this has been the toughest process for them. In fact, one of the issues that you've highlighted is because of a lack of clarity and information from the Department of Health. So we hope and we are imploring that the inquest is undertaken swiftly and that some level of clarity and respect are shown to these parents.
In the days after this, Dr. Carter, and you may well remember there were calls to consider changing the legal drinking age from 18 to 21. I haven't been able to read your full report yet. It's fairly lengthy and obviously the product of a lot of hard work. But you don't seem to be making a call for that at this stage.
Oh, yes, we do.
You do, okay.
So one of the things that we are echoing, Stephen, and perhaps a finding that we are making, is that South Africa has a policy in place. South Africa already has a draft liquor amendment bill in place from 2016, which determines that the age of legal drinking must be increased to 21. Not only that, it determines that there needs to be a restriction in terms of advertising to the point of sale. There is a plethora of other very good measures that is encapsulated in this draft legislation. But Stephen, it's been a bill and draft legislation from 2016. And that is why we have made a finding against the National Department of Trade and Industry, as well as Social Development, for failure to take all appropriate steps and other measures to protect children. Because the legislation or the draft bill is there, but it has been very slow to enact. And we are calling upon the departments, the relevant national departments, to now take swift steps to enact the legislation, which are calling for exactly the parameters that you're pointing out. And another additional parameter would include banning liquor outlets from 500 meters from, for instance, a place of worship or a school. And that is already captured not only in this draft liquor bill, but also in government's own policy. So we are asking for government to follow through and enact this very crucial piece of legislation.
Dr. Eileen Carter, I really appreciate the clarity and the time. Thank you very much indeed. Well, more reaction, I'm sure, to that story through the afternoon.